I'm Ted Wabi, Macomb County Treasurer, and welcome to our program Inside Macomb. Today I have as my guest Gus Blumlein. Gus is our famous St. Clair Shores historian and an expert on anything to do with history, right, Gus?
Well, sort of.
And I have Linda Hiesel, who is with the Coast Guard in the station in St. Clair Shores. Are you
Coast Guard Auxiliary.
Auxiliary, okay, yes, I'm sorry. And you're also, do you work just out of St. Clair Shores? You work out of Port Huron, too?
Basically, our unit works out of Belle Isle and St. Clair Shores.
Okay, so
the Port Huron unit is the next division above us.
well, welcome to the show, and we're going to talk a little bit about Lake St. Clair and the role that the Coast Guard plays, the Coast Guard Auxiliary plays, which is a major, major role in subsidizing what the Coast Guard does in terms of the lake. So how many years have you been involved with the
Been a member of the Auxiliary 20 years.
Wow, you've been there for a long time.
Enjoyed every minute of it.
You've got a lot of stories to tell us, right? Some of the things that happen out in the lake. Well, Gus, what are we going to do in terms of kind of talk a little bit about the history of it and what goes on with the Coast Guard? Where do we want to start with it?
Well, we thought we'd sort of get a running history of how it all started out in St. Clair Shores, how they came to be where they are today. And Linda has a picture to start off with. When you used to call the Coast Guard, you'd have to send down a boat from was it Arson's
From Port Huron.
Port Huron.
Yeah, they had a surf boat, about a 24-foot surf boat, trailable. If there'd be a call in the area, they would simply trailer this boat as close as they could get.
Now, what is this boat here?
That's the Port Huron lifeboat or surf boat.
And that's the one they used to send down if
They
got in
would
trouble
bring
out
it down
in the
by
lake?
trailer and launch it as close to the problem as possible.
Oh boy!
And then that's what
by
they
that
would do.
time, the problem may never may have
True,
gone away.
indeed. Well, something else interesting, the same basic time, this was in the 1940s.
Was that right?
Yeah, and during World War II, up on the Idle Hour, up on Harson's Island, was actually used as a Coast Guard boot camp.
Was that right?
Yeah, and in 1944, there's reports that there was about 350 men at the Port Huron Coast Guard Station doing the same type of training. So evidently, the Idle Hour transferred up to Port Huron in 1944.
Well, that's
It's
impressive.
sort of interesting that it all started up there, in that area.
And then, so that started up in there. Now, the Coast Guard station in St. Clair Shores, what year was that built?
The
first
one-story
one.
building was built in 1961.
Oh, was that late? I thought it was earlier than that. So 1961, they put the
1961.
original one in.
That's correct. The one-story building, yes.
Okay.
But they were stationed here prior to that.
Right.
About,
didn't-
what, 46 or
About
46?
46. You have a
When the
photograph.
city first got Blossom Heath, there was a building, it was the caretaker's home. It was kind of a nice stucco building right back of the Blossom Heath. And I can't, for all of me, find a picture of it anywhere, but here's a picture of Blossom Heath. And in the back, there's two little buildings. One is the ice house, and one is the Coast Guard station. Now, if you can visualize that driveway coming up the front of Blossom Heath, and then those two little buildings in the back there, you can just barely make them out. That's where they were stationed, and they had like their office with their radio and all their equipment in the front, and the boat was just a few feet away in that little cut. And then the troops or the men stayed upstairs. It was like 3 bedrooms up there was like their quarters. I don't know how many men they had, probably 7 or 8, maybe not even that many when they first began.
One thing, too, they had their own what's called units case numbers, so when they would go out to help someone, they assigned a number to it. Their block of numbers was just for them. It was not part of Port Huron or part of the flats. So it actually was a quote-unquote station.
And when did the Coast Guard Auxiliary start?
Coast Guard Auxiliary, working with them, I can't answer that. Coast Guard Auxiliary was started by an act of Congress in 1936 as a civilian voluntary arm of the United States Coast Guard. I've been a member 20 years, and other members have been in longer than I. We've always worked with the Coast Guard in this area.
Now, they put the Coast Guard Auxiliary, they put you through a training process.
Yes,
did
we
they?
train pretty much like the Coast Guard does. We can go all the way to become coxswains of their boats, as well as take our own boats out with qualified crew. It's all training. We can
Now-
stand watches at the station and use the radio. A lot of times when someone calls in for help, they'll be talking to an auxiliarist as opposed to a regular Coast Guard personnel.
I knew that when I was down at the station. That's quite the new station. Now, the Coast Guard Auxiliary now, with you people, you have to have your own, you supply your own boats.
Yes, like I don't have a boat. Not everyone has to have one. But yes, we supply boats, or we can go out on their boats. Well, again, we have to be qualified crew, trained for it, or skippers.
There are a lot of privately owned boats
Oh, very
that
definitely.
are part of the auxiliary.
We supply 2 boats at Shores every weekend, 2 boats at Belle Isle, sometimes 3. All the fireworks that we just had up at Memorial Park.
Now, are you restricted to the type of a call you can go out on?
Well, restricted in some senses. We do no law enforcement, nor do we want to. We leave that to the professionals. We're not going to go out and get someone that's just out of gas unless they're in immediate danger, because then we're in conflict with private enterprise. We will stand by them if they need help until possibly commercial salvage can get there, or we do what's called marbing them. It's a marine broadcast saying, hey, this gentleman's in trouble, this woman's in trouble. Is there anybody around that can help them? Because the Good Samaritan law protects the general public for helping someone that's in trouble. You can't, unless you do something totally stupid.
So if a person gets stranded out in the water, for instance, not being smart enough to get enough gas to get around, you won't tow him in.
Not unless they're in imminent danger or there's no one else around. By law, not by law, but by agreement, we can't, because we would be interfering with commercial salvage.
You did at one time, though, didn't you?
Yes, at one time we did. That's correct.
So that's the reason why you don't tow him in then.
Exactly, exactly.
You're...
Not because we don't want to or can't, because we are not allowed to because of commercial salvage.
Well, I would think that the justification on that thing, I can understand that.
Yes.
But on the other side, like you said, if it was high waves and there was some imminent danger,
Exactly.
you'd pull them in.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like their motto is what? Search and rescue. That's your.
Well, our motto is Semper Paratus, always ready, the Coast Guard motto. But yes, search and rescue is what we do.
That's your function. Yeah.
Exactly, our main function.
Now, how much time a week do you give to the Coast Guard?
It depends on what the individual can give up. My husband and I give quite a bit of time because we're both retired. Other people, the old story was, give us 1 hour a month. Well, we need just a little bit more than that. We want you to do something, because we're in business to help the public and to make the waters safer. So we want you to do something.
Well, they do it. I mean, with the activity that goes on all the way down from even just New Baltimore on down, the tremendous amount of boats on that water, I don't know what they would do. And
On St. Clair Shore Station now, responsibility goes all the way up there.
Does it?
Yes.
And plus the fact, too, that you have, when you're talking about the number of people, I mean, we got about, what, 35 Coast Guard people stationed at the one?
36, absolutely.
36. And without the auxiliary, they'd never begin to cover all the stuff that goes
Sure,
on.
well, the Sheriff's Department helps them out quite a bit, too.
I know Bill Hackle's
Yes.
got
Yes.
his boats out there, and but I mean, it's a big lake. I
Oh,
mean,
yes, it
you
is.
got how many boats are out there? Thousands of boats are out there, and
What is it, a nautical mile between 9 and 10
Yeah.
mile has the largest concentration of boats in the country.
that's right, in the United States. What have you got, Gus? You got some more pictures?
Yeah, but prior to that, Ted, I think Linda's got a few pictures.
Yeah, this
I
is the
think that might be
one-story building. The
interesting.
original building was built in 1961 for a cost of $100,000. Only had a crew of 8 men.
I remember that one.
Yeah, and the land that it's on was filled, as we're told, by the debris from the old Hudson Motor Car Company. So the old joke is if you're going to plant a tree, you might dig up a fender. You never know. It was sold to the Coast Guard by the state of Michigan for $50, with the idea being that if they ever gave it up as private use property, it would revert back to the state of Michigan.
Rather than the city.
Rather than the city, exactly, exactly. Interestingly enough, in 1964 and 65, this station also had an annex station. It was a houseboat up on the Clinton River behind
right?
Anchor Bar. And they got their power and water from Anchor Bar.
Okay,
But-
now there were 8 people stationed in this
At
one.
that point in time,
And
that's
how many
correct.
boats there?
At that time, I'm not sure. Probably at least 2. One of them, this came off of. One of their original boats was a 31-footer. And this is old 30381, which meant it was a 30-foot utility boat. And
How
one
long,
of the...
How old is that boat? How
Oh,
long
well,
ago
from
was this?
1961.
61, eh?
And when the boat was not used anymore at Shore Station, they sent it up to Flat Station.
Oh, is that right?
So it lived a life up there for a while. But the exact number of boats, I think they had 2 at the time. But basically, it was interesting because sort of the history of these stations is where it says something about the architecture and the times. Where their watch bay was is where you look out and take phone calls and all radio calls. On that one-story station was in a bay overlooking the lake. It was great. You could see out. Everything was just fine. Then when they put the second story on, which was in, what, 1977, they started the second deck, where they just put the second deck on the top of the first deck. It took them until 1979 to complete it, because they had plumbing problems in the upstairs bathrooms.
You couldn't find enough water.
Exactly. And back in 76, I believe it was, they put the seawall, the metal seawall, around the east and north side of the station, because all it was just rocks
Was there?
up against the land, and they
I
ran into
remember that,
terrible
yeah.
erosion
Right,
problems.
yeah.
So they put the seawall on the north and east side back in, I think it was 76. But in 1980, they finally finished it and put the seawall in where that cut is to go back to where the boats
Yeah,
are kept now and
right.
where they were then.
Well, the station they got now is gorgeous.
Oh, it is
It's a
indeed.
great
We've
job.
got-
It's one of the best in the country. It's one of the best in the country. In 1987, Shores and Flats stations were combined administratively. They still had boats in the Flats, but Shores took control of the administrative part of it. And Flats was closed at a later date. I don't exactly remember when. But what was interesting on this one, when they put the second story on, they moved the watch bay up to the second floor, so you'd have more visibility, which made sense. The problem was they built the windows high. You sat down at your desk, couldn't see out the windows. So they had to raise the floor about 8 to 10 inches so you
Oh,
could
is
see
that
out the
right?
windows. Because you overlooked the marinas in case there was a fire or something. And you overlooked the water. So it's called plan ahead, you know.
Yeah, right.
But from there, they went in 1989, they went to trailers because they were going to build the
I
new
remember
building
that.
we talked
Yeah,
about.
We gave them the space in the park.
Exactly. You were kind
Remember
enough
that.
to give them
Yeah.
the space for 2 trailers.
Yeah.
They lived and did everything in those trailers. It was unbelievably crowded, but it sufficed while they
They
were
got
building.
by, yeah. But
Yeah, we did.
It was a...
Now, the boats here were still kept behind the old station while it was being torn down.
Yeah,
So they would
remember-
have to run down the causeway to
all
get to
way-
the
That's
boats.
right, all the way down, that's right.
If there
yeah.
was a problem where they had to get out in the water, an accident or something. But,
They got through it okay.
oh yes,
Yeah.
always ready. And here, this picture you ought to recognize.
So who's that guy there?
November 90, you, Commander of Group Detroit Jan Smith, and the Commander of 9th Coast Guard District, Rear Admiral Pennington.
Yeah,
you cut the
Pennington,
ribbon.
We cut the ribbon
on
for
the new
the
station.
for the opening. I remember that. Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
That was my. That's when I say people were really impressed that we're there about the how.
Well,
how
the
this-
Coast Guardsmen that are there say this new station is just the most magnificent thing
I
around.
hate to say it, but it's a better looking building than our city hall.
Yeah, it is.
Here's the new building. It was actually completed in June of 90, but they had, tweak little things like you do any new building, and that's when the commissioning was in
That was the
November.
opening day there. I mean, the ribbon cutting, wasn't it?
Yes,
The
I
picture.
believe it
yeah.
was. And here the watch bay, surprisingly enough, faces the parking lot. And it's a
Yeah,
poor
right, yeah.
description of our times
That's
for
right, yeah.
security, so they can see people coming and going from the base.
But now that, of course, the size of that, it's a big station. It's one of the bigger stations
Yes,
you've
it
got,
is.
isn't
It sleeps, it can house, not just sleep, it houses, can house up to 10 liveaboards. 36 people are there on 2 shifts, port and starboard.
And explain that because some of the guys live within the vicinity of the area.
Some of them live
They
in
rent
St. Clair
houses
Shores.
or rent apartments or whatever
right.
it is with their family.
Some live on Selfridge.
Yeah. If they're married, they.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think there's about 8 people that live there now.
Yeah, a lot of people used to be under the impression that 35 people stayed there.
No,
They
no.
don't. We'd have to have a hotel there.
Exactly, exactly. Well, this is the second
Now that's
busiest.
if people here, boaters or people who would be boaters or whatever want to visit that station, they're welcome to go down. and-
Anytime. Call ahead of time to make sure they're not having any training. If you got Boy Scout groups, Girl Scout groups,
Yeah.
be more than
But I
happy
think
to.
it'd be interesting for people to go down and visit the station because it plays a major role in the boating industry, and also in alerting the proper officials of any problems that are on the lake.
Like I said, it's the second busiest Coast Guard station in the Coast Guard.
What's the busiest?
Miami.
Miami.
But you figure our season is only from Memorial Day
Yeah.
to Labor Day.
That's right. So we're the number 2 in the nation.
No, more than the nation, the Coast Guard, period. That
that
includes
right?
Puerto Rico and other
Oh,
locations.
so that's to say something about the activity
That's
that's
right.
on that lake.
A lot of action going on out there.
Oh yeah, that's.
Well, they average about 800 cases a year.
It's amazing to me how anybody doesn't hit anybody out there.
They do.
All the sailboats are out there, and they're in one area, and then you've got the gas-fired jobs going this way, and there's a lot of boats out in that water.
That's where we hope through education, our public education courses, that we can make a little bit more intelligent boaters.
Well, that's good because they need it.
Well, they average about, like I said, 800 cases a year. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's-
The station is absolutely beautiful. Our open house is going to be June 17th, open
Is
to the
it?
public.
Yeah.
Tours of the boats, Coast Guard boats as well as auxiliary, tours of the station. Oh, we'll have souvenirs this time, Coast Guard souvenirs, food.
Yeah, I worked with them on getting that program
Yes, you did
last time
indeed.
to try to get
You
more
did indeed.
people. They're trying to get into to the public more to let them know what that does. You know. You got another one there?
Well, this is just our 41-footer. The Coast Guard station right now has their 41-footer, 41449. They have a 25-foot utility or Boston whaler, and then they have 2 what are called RHIs, rigid hull inflatables. They're those little orange jobby-doos you see running around the lake. We affectionately call them the pumpkin boats.
Now these here are, does this one have water pressure, I mean, to shoot for
Yes,
fires? and
fire hose,
marinas?
yes it does. Yes it does.
See, one of the things I think people have to understand too, that you got marinas all the way up and down that lake, and you get a marina fire, you could have a real problem on your hands.
Yes, you
And
could.
that's why, do they do any, I know you do, they offer boat inspections too, do they not?
Oh, the Coast Guard Auxiliary does that. Yeah, we
You'll
inspect
inspect boats to make sure you
Simply
have
to
the
ensure,
proper,
yes, simply to ensure the proper safety
they'll
equipment.
look at it, and that's a real must for anybody that's going to be in the boat, on a boat. Is
It's a
to
good
find
idea.
out, yeah, because once you get in trouble, it's too late to determine you had the wrong equipment.
Exactly, or that it didn't work.
That's right. So
Exactly.
I think, and I know when I attended a couple of those sessions, just the difference in the type of life jacket you have can make a big difference.
Oh, yes, some will keep your head afloat if you're
right.
unconscious, some will not.
Yeah, and so, Gus, you got some pictures?
Yeah, speaking of the Coast Guard Auxiliary, back in '74, we in the police department worked very closely with the Coast Guard, and we were doing crime prevention and also Coast Guard safety and so forth. And there's a couple people on here that Linda can speak to, Claire Crawford and Dale Younglove, the two Coast Guardsmen in the middle.
Yeah, Claire Crawford was instrumental in getting the Miller Memorial Light that's up on top of the 9 Mile
Oh,
Tower.
is that right?
Yeah, he was a salesman. He belonged to one of the flotillas in our Coast Guard auxiliary units. And he went out and got donations to pay
That's
for
the
that
one on the
light.
high rise?
Exactly.
Yeah.
At the time it was put in, it was the second brightest, or was the brightest light continuously operating in the Great Lakes. The only one that was brighter was in Chicago, but it only worked seasonally. But he got all the money together to put that up, and got the helicopter to put it up, because the roof is slanted and had to be set perfectly on the 4 bolts to put in place. He loaded it first time.
Is that right?
Knocked over one of the parking lots when it was taking the light up, but other than the other lights, but other than that, did a fantastic job, and then the people that ran the helo donated their salaries back.
That's a tremendous beacon out
Oh,
there
yes,
in
it is.
terms when you, I've seen it at night, I mean, way down the lake, you can spot that thing.
Well, 90% of the people that are in trouble, when you ask them for their location, due east of the 9 Mile Tower.
Was
You
that
find
right?
them in Anchor Bay, you find them down the Trade River.
Is that right?
They see that tower and they figure, hey, there's something sitting behind it. I'm due east from it.
I'll be darned.
Well, you know,
Go ahead.
prior to the Coast Guard, the people weren't absolutely without any help out there. We had a harbor master, and the last one I remember was Norm Bakeman. He had Bakeman's Harbor Inn. He had a boat, I think it was moored at Miller Marina, and then there was, whenever there was a distress call or whatever, he would respond to it. But that was a little more time consuming. He had to come from wherever he was and then get in the boat and go out there. I know my brother and his buddy were off to Ford Point, and and a girl, there was 3 of them, and they flopped over a sailboat, and there was only enough buoyancy on for 2 of them to stay on there, and they had to take turns swimming, and the other 2 would hang on, and somebody apparently spotted them, and Norm Bakeman come out there and pulled them in, and that's what we had. And then, of course, we had Hank Mason. You know, every time we talk
Oh,
about St.
fine
Clair
Hank,
Shores,
yeah.
we run across something. and I
God
was
rest his soul.
talking to his daughter the other day, and she said, "Gus, you got to come over. I got something you want to see." And this is a life preserver that hung on the pier at 11 Mile Road. Now, I don't remember that. In 1928, that was the year I was born. But
say.
there was a pier off of 11 Mile Road, not Grinnell Park. Grinnell Park was there also, but there was a city pier off 11 Mile Road, and that's where this thing hung.
Well, I remember that because I'll tell you why I remember that is because when they were doing, I forget what it was out there, somebody hit parts of that old pier out there.
Okay, yeah. So this is what you had out there, and Hank Mason was one of the lifeguards, and then, of course, Jefferson Beach always had their, from the early 20s, they had their boat, their speed boats, and they would respond to, well, of course, anybody would if they were aware of it, but...
Hank kept them floating with that?
Well, I don't know. I think if he'd have thrown that out there, it might have sunk them. It's kind of heavy, but...
Definitely not Coast Guard
it's just
approved.
no, it's just a nice piece of nostalgia. Maybe it would have saved Augie the mushrat there from drowning, but...
I'll be darned. That's one of Hank's. Hank is
he had his finger
he's
in
not with us
everything,
anymore, but I'll tell you, if you wanted to know what was going on in old St. Clair Shores around along that lake, you called Hank.
Yeah, no matter what was going on, he knew something about it. When the Coast Guard had their office in that little old building in back of the Blossom Heath, a lot of us would, us being the police department, we'd work in the afternoons, we'd go down there after work and play cards with the Coast Guard guys. And I remember one night some guy had an automatic pilot, and a distress call came in, and we just had to go right out to the end of the pier and pick them up. They had hit the rocks out there that you were talking about before, and of course we just got the ambulance down there and hauled a couple of them off to Saratoga Hospital at that time. And we've always had a close relationship with the Coast Guard, you know. And it's not only summer rescues out there with boatings and stuff, it's ice rescues. You recall that
Yes.
Jim Halsey and the boys are out there chasing those kids that fell in, and then they got the Coast Guard helicopter to come out and pick them up on that. And we haven't had it in the last few years, but frequently we've had ice flows where guys would be fishing, and all of a sudden they look through the hole in the shanty and they see the sand going by pretty fast, and they'd broken loose and they're going out to sea on an ice flow. And that's where the Coast Guard comes in with the chopper.
That's what I was saying. I think that, you know, it was back in when everybody started, they wanted to move the Coast Guard out of St. Clair Shores.
Right.
Yeah.
And that really started a wave of people getting behind it and led to the new St. Clair Shores station that's there now. And I mean, it would have been a real disaster when you've got that that number of boats between 9 and 10 mile, known as the nautical mile, and to move out somewhere else. Where were they going to go?
I don't know. I don't
It seemed
know.
like they were going to do Belle Isle. They were going to
Would
consolidate
have had it in Belle
something.
Isle and Port Huron because
Yeah.
Flats was closed.
Yeah, that's what they were going to do, and boy, I'll tell you, that led to a real squawk of people, because I've seen them bring in people, and I'll tell you what, without them. Another thing that we talk about is people aren't aware of, and you read in the paper after it's happened, is some guy out there boozed up and going along. I mean, we've had a couple of deaths on the lake in the last couple of years or so from just that thing happening.
I was going to say the BWI is one of our biggest problems out in the lake.
So how do you detect a person? Like, just watch for, like, I know a police officer on land watches for erratic driving and weaving.
part of it.
And do you
High
get,
speed in the wrong places.
Yeah. And do you get a lot of calls from boaters out there saying, hey, there's some guy out here all boozed up?
At times,
Do ya?
yeah. They try to patrol at certain high-risk hours to make sure somebody doesn't go out there and run into somebody and hurt someone.
So you, as a Coast Guard auxiliary, don't get into the
No, we do
stop
not.
arrest. What do you do? Call for a boat?
Coast Guard takes care of that. They have boarding officers.
No, but I mean, if you're out there and you spot a guy that's that you think
we can
is-
call in. So can a private citizen. Call in and say, we've got an idiot out here
Okay.
that's
and
just acting erratic and is going to hurt somebody if they don't get stopped. And if they have, either that or the sheriff will come out.
Now, I know when we put the fireworks on, we get, I don't know, hundreds of boats out there. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, they line up in a row,
Yep.
all the way from 9 Mile Road on out.
Well, the flashing lights you see, the high-intensity white strobes, those are auxiliary boats.
I see.
Flashing blue lights are the
So you get them out of the area, get them all lined up, and
crowd control, in essence.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I mean, there's a ton of people out there. What is one of the most serious things you've seen happen on the lake in your 20 years?
Oh my goodness, most serious. There was a houseboat that sank very quickly with a woman, as we jokingly said, 19 months pregnant. I mean, she was about ready to deliver, and they hit something submerged, and they just went down. They were all saved, but it happened so fast.
Have you been involved in any of the fatalities that have happened on the lake?
Fortunately not. Fortunately not. There have been a lot of them, and very serious ones.
Well, they can break up, and, you know, that lake gets pretty rough if
Oh,
it
yes.
wants to, because it's a shallow lake. And
It's got so much fetch, so much area for the wind to whip it up. It can get very windy, very choppy, very quickly.
Now, if somebody were interested in being involved with the Coast Guard Auxiliary, what would they do?
I'm sorry, be arrested and...
No, they wanted to be involved.
Well, be involved.
Yeah.
Oh, the easiest thing is to contact someone in the Coast Guard Auxiliary. You can call the Coast Guard station. They'll give out usually our number. And basically visit some of the different units. Each unit has its own personality. They're called flotillas. There's 8 flotillas in our greater Detroit area. In Division 12. Go visit them, see what's involved. We'll explain the programs to them. We have a lot of handouts. We offer a lot of advanced education once you become a member. They can take Coast Guard Institute courses.
Do they, a person wants, is the auxiliary always looking for people?
Oh, definitely. Very
So
definitely.
you do, because of the time
Very definitely,
commitments and
yes,
everything else.
very definitely. Because you need people to teach, you need people to examine boats, to go out on the water. Public affairs, the Coast Guard Auxiliary is one of the best kept secrets in the world. We don't pay for advertising, we have to go out and get it on our own.
Do you have a number at all that you know that could be
I
called?
can give out my own because I'm an equal opportunity employer. I'll give a number, anybody information on any area. I'd be more than happy to give my own out if you would like.
Okay,
It's
yes.
area
I think
code
you should.
810-776-8058. I have an
so-
answering machine.
So if anybody wants to know about getting involved with the Coast Guard Auxiliary, there's the opportunity to
Be
call.
my guest, I'll be happy to help them.
And, well, I think they do a fantastic, having been mayor there for 12 years and watching what went on and living there for all these years, but I don't think anybody's more of an expert on the lake than Gus. Gus, you lived there all your life, and you've seen some real things happen out there.
Yeah, and it was a blessing when they came along because, like I said before, it was you know, whoever you could get to grab a boat and go out there and get somebody. And there were constantly people drowning from ice flows, and there were a lot of suicides out there, people falling off of boats or getting thrown off of boats. And of course, that's for the police to determine whether he was thrown off. You know, the old story was he got drunk and fell off. Well, you know, when you get investigating, you find out they're both involved in something, and he may have got pushed off. So that lake has taken a lot of people over the years, a lot of people.
Well, like I say, you lived on it.
It gives a
all
lot
these
of
years.
pleasure, but it also...
Just quickly, because we only got a minute left to wrap this thing up. And back in the old booze running days, were there some real episodes of anybody,
well, there's
some with the high-speed chases?
There's a couple guys running around with still have bullets in them. There was one guy, he wanted to come on our TV show, and he died just before that. He was going to tell about how he carried a bullet with him from the Coast, not from the Coast Guard, but from the feds when they were rum running. And a lot of them run up on shore, you know, to get away from them and leave the boat and abandon
Didn't a lot
the
of
boat.
them used to dump the stuff and go back and get it
Yes,
later?
you know,
They all
yeah.
knew where to dump
So
it?
I got on the boat, you know, and then it was a contest of who could find it the next day or whenever the weather cleared up, whether the feds found it or whether the guy found it himself.
Well, there's some real interesting stories, and we'll have you back on for some more of those. And certainly, we have a great deal of respect for the Coast Guard Auxiliary because this is a volunteer group. They receive nothing. They just donate their time and their efforts in trying to keep the people, the boaters, and safe. And really, with that enhancement of these people working, it keeps Lake St. Clair as a recreational, makes it safe as a recreational facility out there. Nothing more devastating than to have a bunch of people out there whacking into each other and not caring about the other guy.
That's true.
And
If they could just forget the alcohol with the boating, it would help a great deal.
don't drink and drive your boats,
That's
not
correct.
just your car. And,
That's correct.
I would say if a guy's got enough money to buy one of those big yachts, you got to have enough money to buy somebody to drive it for him.
Very quickly, I have seen some situations where I've been out there where people get. I was on a boat one time with someone that was hitting it pretty heavy, and I said, "Stop."
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be a part of it. Well, we got to wrap this up, Gus, and we want to thank you in presenting what the auxiliary does. And
I thank you for allowing us to do it.
And certainly we want to push more. And if you're interested, call that number. Give it to us one more time.
810-776-8058.
And you'll really do something that's rewarding. Thank you both, and we'll see you next show, Gus, when we get you back on again.
It's been our pleasure, sir.
Pleasure indeed. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Comcast, too, for the job they do in putting on the show.
Yes.
I don't know, I'm missing something there.
This is New Guinea.
It's so powerful.
I don't see it.
I'm having an out-of-decade experience. I was walking and came upon a fountain which bore the sign, "Don't drink the water."
Do you
And the
get
beggar
this?
carries a
Isn't it
sign saying, "I'm
fantastic?"
blind." What does this poem mean to me? It's like a collage of images.
Let's
and
face it,
sounds.
not every cultural activity appeals to everyone.
Finding an oasis.
So we're giving you something everyone likes, a choice. That's why 23,000 arts and humanities groups are inviting you to find something you can get excited about. Just call for a free brochure about what's going on in your community.
I think I'm getting into this.
They're tuning up.
The arts and humanities, there is something in it for you.